Jericho, the first city on earth, in the heart of a sunburnt valley. Where temperatures soar and the land cracks beneath the heat, there lies a miracle. It's called Jericho. Surrounded by desert and stone, Jericho stands as an anomaly, a pocket of life in a sea of silence. To understand how a city could rise here more than 10,000 years ago, we must begin not with walls or towers, but with water. Jericho lies in the Jordan Rift Valley, part of the Great Fault Line that runs from Syria down through the Dead Sea and into Africa. And here, nestled more than 250 meters below sea level, the lowest city on Earth, something extraordinary happens. A freshwater spring bubbles up from the earth. It is called Ain's Sultan. Ain's Sultan flows with quiet persistence, a rare, consistent source of life in an otherwise hostile land. It has done so for thousands of years, never drying, never ceasing. And to ancient humans, it must have seemed like magic. At the end of the last ice age, as glaciers retreated and climates shifted, humans wandered. Most were still nomadic, chasing herds and gathering plants. But then, some found the spring, and they stayed. The spring transformed Jericho into an oasis, a green jewel in the desert. Round it, reeds, grasses, and trees took root. Small plots of land became fields. Barley and wheat began to grow. Goats and sheep grazed on irrigated grasslands. It was here that humans first began to farm. The geography was perfect. Jericho sat in a natural basin, shielded by hills but open enough to allow trade and migration. The Dead Sea was nearby, and so was the Jordan River. Important landmarks even in prehistory. But it was the spring that made everything possible. The settlers here learned to manage water. They dug irrigation ditches, stored grain, and planted systematically. This wasn't just survival. This was an adaptation, innovation, the early blueprint of agriculture. Around the spring, a community began to take shape. Homes were built close to the source, and as generations passed, the settlement grew in complexity. The early roundhouses clustered tightly suggest that people connected not just by space, but by cooperation. Today, the site is known as Tell Sultana, mound built up from layer upon layer of human habitation. Each new generation built atop the old, and over time, the settlement rose like a sedimentary memory. This pattern of rebirth is found in cities across the ancient world. But here, in Jericho, it began. The surrounding desert reminds us just how precious Jericho's position was. To the west, barren hills. To the east, the harsh Judean wilderness. But in Jericho, green flourished. It was a magnet for people, for animals, for trade, a place of permanence in a world of uncertainty. Water gave them more than crops. It gave them time to build, to bury, to remember, to imagine more than just the next meal, to imagine a future. Even now, the spring flows. It has seen tribes and empires rise and fall. It has outlasted kings and prophets. The same water that once fed the first farmers of Jericho still trickles through the soil today. Without it, there would be no Jericho, and perhaps no cities at all. The first to settle, imagine a time before nations, before writing, before even the idea of a city. It's a time when survival meant movement, following the herds, chasing the rain, a world where home was wherever the sun set. But here at Jericho, something changed. Over 10,000 years ago, at the foot of the Judean hills, a small group of people did the unthinkable. They stopped, and they stayed. Drawn by the constant water of the Ain's Sultan spring, these early settlers began building the first permanent homes. Not tents, not temporary lean-tos, but structures meant to last. They crafted roundhouses from sun-dried mud brick, packed tightly with straw, shaped by hand. Floors were made from polished lime plaster, smooth, deliberate. Roofs were likely domed and thatched with reeds from the nearby marshes. This wasn't just shelter, it was architecture. Inside, there was a central hearth for cooking and warmth. Stone tools littered the floor, flint blades, grinding stones, and bone awls for piercing hides. They still hunted gazelle, wild cattle, birds, and fish. But increasingly, they planted seeds instead of chasing prey. They gathered wheat, barley, and lentils, and learned how to tame plants to the rhythm of the seasons. The shift was slow, generational, But here, on the banks of the spring, hunting and gathering gave way to farming, and farming led to stability. Food was stored in pits dug into the floor, protected from animals and the elements. Leftover grain meant families could eat through winter. It also meant time to plan, to build, to think. Time to pass on stories and skills. This was part of a wider transformation, the Neolithic Revolution, spreading slowly across the Fertile Crescent. But Jericho was one of the first places where it happened. It became more than a settlement. It became a prototype for the world's first communities. They left behind clues, microliths, small stone blades set into wooden shafts, mortar and pestles worn smooth from years of grinding grain, tools to work leather, cut meat, and carve bone. Everything was made by hand, passed down, and shared. Their lives were hard disease, injury, drought, all very real threats. But still, they endured. For centuries, they buried their dead beneath the homes they built, perhaps to honor them, perhaps to keep them close. Some skulls were treated with extraordinary care, faces recreated with clay, seashells set in for eyes. Were these ancestors, shamans, community leaders? We may never know, but the act of remembrance points to something new. Identity, memory, culture. Layer by layer, Jericho grew, not just in size, but in meaning. These first settlers weren't just building homes, they were laying down the foundation of something entirely new, permanence. In an age when movement was survival, they chose to root themselves in the earth, and that choice, simple, quiet, revolutionary, changed the course of history. We walk through cities now like it's ordinary, like it was always this way. But once, long ago, it was a radical act to stay in one place. To plant a seed, to build a wall, to say this is home. Jericho was among the first places where humanity made that choice.